Welcome to Organizational Sherlocks, the podcast where business meets psychology and your organizational puzzles meet their match.
Join us for captivating stories and practical solutions to unravel your toughest challenges.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, your guides to prescription for business success.
Let's dive in.
Hi, listeners. We're excited to let you know that today we are bringing back to you Season 1, Episode 3, One Size Does Not Fit All, Why IO Psychology Belongs in Business, and a very important topic to why we are here at Organizational Sherlocks. Enjoy.
Welcome back to Organizational Sherlocks. Morgan and Elizabeth here. Excited to talk with you all about why IO psychology, industrial organizational psychology, is useful in business. I'd like to start off really quick just by asking, how are you doing today, Morgan?
I'm good. Busy day, but ready to go on this podcast. And just for those of you who don't know IO psychology, it stands for Industrial Organizational Psychology. If you're just joining us, we did briefly talk about it earlier on in our series, but just to cover that again for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited about today's episode. I think there's a lot of different ways we could take this and a lot of information we can share. But, you know, as the organizational Sherlocks that Morgan and I are, and all of you are either are or are becoming, I guess. One of the biggest things that we like to think about are kind of, what are the top trends? What are the things that people are talking about today in business, in our workplaces? We're not going to, go through all of them and give you a bunch of statistics by any means, although I'm sure we could. But I think there's a lot for us to talk about today. Things like, returning to the office policies, is AI going to replace my job? I know we've probably all asked ourselves that a gazillion times, right? Conflict resolution, is a college degree or skills, what's more important? So I think there's a lot of different trends for us to consider talking about. And all of that is useful in business. So before we dive into any of those pieces, I would love to know, Morgan, if you could share a little bit about maybe how you use IO psychology in your business as Chief People Officer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using IO psychology constantly. I am constantly having those conversations with people of, hey, use the psychology behind it. And so that could be sales, that could be marketing, that could be training someone. I had a conversation just today. I said to someone like, look, you have a great mindset. You already have that knowledge, or innate knowledge, I guess I should say, on how to solve problems and how to find information that you need to find to, resolve something for a customer. And while that's great, you want other people to know how to do that as well. So you're at a point of you're trained to the extent of you just naturally have that that skill set, I guess, of problem solving, decision making. But you need to teach other people how to develop that. And so that's the difficult part. So that's where IO psychology really fell into this conversation today, where I told her she doesn't really like training people because she doesn't know how to train people, but she knows what to do. And so it's a matter of communicating and creating that bridge of how you do it versus how they do it. And so in our conversation, I was saying there's psychology behind training. So you need to get someone there step by step to do what you do. Training them by them practicing it, not just you telling them what to do, so that they can independently do it later on. There's a whole psychology behind problem solving on that side, on training on that side. So there's one area I use it. But then on top, keep going.
That's a really good point. I'm going to jump in for a second if that's okay. It's that experiential learning, right? Mm-hmm. Or that action learning. And, it's interesting because for me, like growing up, it was, I needed to learn how to drive a manual vehicle, right? Mm-hmm. It was a rule of my parents that I would know how to drive a manual vehicle just in case I were ever in a situation where I needed it, right? And my dad tried to tell me how it worked. And he tried to teach it to me very clearly. He's an engineer, so he did a really good job of explaining the mechanisms and how it all comes together. But it wasn't until I actually took the time to look at the engine and understand and get behind the wheel, and I will tell you, kill it about 70,000 times before I figured out how to drive the manual vehicle, right? And I think that's an example of what you're talking about. It's not just about the step-by-step guide on how to do something, but a lot of it really is the hands-on experiential part. So I love that you incorporate that.
Yeah, anyone can be directed, but can you fully delegate that task later on? And to get to that point, you have to coach the person to get there.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just some situational leadership I'm talking about right then and there. So there's an area I use it. I'm constantly creating new training programs for the company. So training manuals I can look at, which is the step-by-step guide, but then training programs that go with them, which teaches them through experiential training. I really do enjoy that side of it, leadership development. But that's not the only place I use it. I use my IO psychology in marketing. I use it in sales. I use it when it comes to performance management of employees. You see it across the board. It's people operations that I need the psychology to help with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It sounds like you use it every day.
Yeah, I definitely do. What about you? So what about you, Elizabeth? I know you are specifically in business consulting, so you have to use it every day.
Yes, all the time, actually. I'm trying to think of the million examples and also how to condense that down into a 35 to 40-minute podcast. So we'll just give you a couple of the more basic ones. But yeah, I work with a variety of different organizations, right? People in finance, people, IT teams and sales teams and legal teams and all of these different people, right? And I will agree with you 100% on the experiential learning. A lot of what I do is less about telling them what to do and helping guide them to find the answer themselves, right? It's kind of that experience of kind of having that epiphany, right? I can
buy-in,
exactly right? The buy-in, yeah. Like I can tell you, Morgan, okay, Morgan, in order for you to be more effective as a leader, I need you to do X, right? But until you truly understand the reasoning behind it, I don't know that it necessarily has the same impact as kind of coaching you through and helping you experience what that feels like and how that impact can be realized.
Yeah, does it make sense? I totally understand what you're saying, because I love that you're saying that, because I just had another conversation today. I pull in some IO psychology mentees every single quarter to help them. They help me work on some real life examples in business that they don't necessarily get as a student. And so I was talking with one of my students today on why we include questions and activities in training programs. And it's because, as I said, we want to open up that dam. So right now they have a dam. They're not necessarily receptive to this communication, to the direction they're given, especially if they've been in the industry or at the company for a long time. And so you need to open up that dam first. And in order to open up that dam, those questions, you have those thought-provoking questions that gets the person ready to think on their own, and it makes them more receptive to being directed and using that direction effectively based off how they've been taught to use it. So it builds buy-in, and it's so important for organizational leaders to do that. And so for you, I'm sure you've experienced needing to, listen to them. What do they want out of this? What do they need out of this? You need to create those questions to create the bridge.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And I think too, some of that comes down to telling your story, right? And I don't necessarily mean telling your story like open up the floodgates and let everyone know everything about you in a vulnerable way. That's not what I mean. I mean it more in the sense of there are organizational initiatives, right? Or goals or changes that might be happening across the organization or within your team, let's say. And as a leader, it's your job to find the way that feels authentic and true to you in how you tell that story to the people that you are responsible for and work with, right? And that story doesn't have to sound exactly the same for every single person, which I think is a big part in what I do. It's about helping people find the best way to tell their story in the way that feels authentic to them, but also is accomplishing the goals that the business has set out to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, you're playing on psychology right there when you think of in group. So you want to be able to be receptive to your team. So not only do you want to be authentic as a leader, but you also want to be the type of leader that people want to listen to you, because maybe not just because you're authentic, but because they feel similarities to you. And authenticity goes a long way to create that. And so there's the psychology behind group ideas, and not necessarily not get into group think as some people might be thinking right now, but the idea of group similarity.
Yeah. And knowing who's in the room too. And I'll say that's a big part of how I use IO psychology every day, right? Which I know there's a little bit of it blends into clinical or counseling psychology to some extent here, because we're looking at, factors. I look at factors every day related to personality, related to, motivational drive and achievement drive, and all of those different pieces, using validated tools to understand someone. Now, the way that I absolutely I love doing it is taking all of that data, let's say for a team, right? As we're talking about sharing the story, and knowing who you have in the room, right? Are they driven? Do you have a team that's predominantly driven by finding purpose in their life? Are they trying to do something that is going to last for a long time and really have a strong impact? Is that important to them? Well, your story might be tailored in one way for a group like that, maybe versus, and it's not a one way or another. I'm just kind of giving two polarities here just as an example, but versus another group who maybe is very, data oriented and productivity driven. And it's not necessarily about doing something that lasts the long term, but something that makes an impact now and has an immediate feel and an immediate experience, right? Your story is going to sound different, even though the goal is to get from point A to point B.
Yeah. And so people might think that you're not being authentic that way, but you are. No matter what in your life, you tailor your stories to the groups around you. You're going to tailor a story that happened to you differently to your friends than you do to your family, even to different friend groups that you might have. And so tailoring it in a company is also useful. Sometimes that in the end, it could result in the same, not the same result. I hate saying that because the result's ending in the same result, but you're aiming for the same result.
Yeah.
Overall. And you're just, like you said, tailoring it to the different groups. You're still being authentic. You're just changing the communication channel a little bit so that the other individuals that you're leading understand what you're saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, that understanding is key, right? Oh my goodness, I love it. Do you know what it's making me think of though? And it's a little bit of a shift in our conversation, so bear with me, but it's making me think about one of the trends that I referenced in the beginning, or the trends of things people are talking about, and that's related to AI, right? Or artificial intelligence, and whether we believe that artificial intelligence will replace our jobs. Right now, I'm going to say I am not an expert in artificial intelligence, so please don't hear me say that. But I do want to say that, in a study, they had found that 22% of people employed today, believe that AI will replace their job in the next 5 years.
Yep.
To me, it may not sound like a big amount, but that to me feels like a really big amount, right?
Yeah. I mean, 22%. That's 22%. A lot of people.
Yeah, it's a ton of people. And I think about what we're talking about right now. And yeah, artificial intelligence can figure out how to tell a story, but can it and will it? And I would argue it will not. And I know there's a lot of people who probably agree with me, maybe some that don't, but I think the majority of people agree. Can it truly understand the human element and be able to react in a way like we're talking about right now, to understand group differences, to understand group similarities, right? To understand how in this moment you may be experiencing an emotion that isn't similar to what AI thinks it should be.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're human.
So when I think of AI, I think about how a lot of AI is used to either improve messaging or to summarize messaging in a sense. So I don't know if it's necessarily able to, problem solve, create new ideas. It's creating from what it can take. Meaning, like when you think of AI within imaging, it's taking from all these other images around it with some sort of inspiration. Yes, people do that as well, but you're not legitimately taking from exact existing pictures that might be around you. You're creating something new. And for that reason, I mean, there's so much AI in the court world right now, because AI is not necessarily a trademarkable, it doesn't create trademarkable material because it's not created by a human. But there's still an argument behind that, because, well, if I put this information into the AI feature, whether that be something like ChatGPT or another AI software, then can't I trademark what I create with the words I use? Technically, no. And there's a big argument behind that. And so yeah, AI, it's a little confusing. People are worried about it, but I don't think it will necessarily be able to relate as we do now. I think it'll help us create efficiencies in the workplace. And maybe that's why people are more worried about, the 22% are worried about losing jobs, because if you can do 8 people's work with 7 people now, that's 1 person gone. So I do see that as a legitimate concern.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with you in that way. I think that it's more likely to lead to kind of new responsibilities or changing job descriptions as things become more efficient. I mean, I use ChatGPT all the time. Sometimes I even just ask it, like, I'm thinking about a word that I think means this, and it'll kind of pull from all over and give me an idea of what I'm thinking. And so in that way, I do think it's helpful. However, I think it creates an even bigger argument as to why IO psychology is important in business, right? Yes. Because I do think about, without IO psychologists or industrial organizational professionals within the work setting, whether that's in HR or, change management or organizational development or whatever the area that they are, without that, in some ways you risk missing a voice, and missing a very important voice, because as we talked about in a previous episode, all of our businesses are made up of people.
Yeah.
Right. So we need people there.
Yeah. And we've talked about in-group bias before, or the group bias before, and like groupthink. And I know I touched on it earlier in the episode, so it's making me think of it again. So in groupthink, the person that is constantly saying no to what the majority of the group is saying, obviously they have groupthink going on. They're all stuck in their ways because everyone's agreeing with them, so they must be right? But if that one person keeps disagreeing, eventually they're going to prevail. AI is not going to allow that to happen, because they're going to take what the majority says. Right. I mean, I could talk about AI forever. I could talk about how the working class is changing. It went from 66% of able-bodied people to more like 60%, less than 60% actually, of able-bodied people currently. And so maybe AI will make up for the lost amount of people rather than replacing people. That's how I think about it.
Absolutely. I think we may need to have an entire episode on AI, or an entire month dedicated to it, and maybe get some professional that is an expert in this area on to talk about it.
Yeah, we'll certainly go back to AI at some point. But when we think about people, we also think about returning to the office, another trend. So a lot of people were very much against going to the office, and still people are against going to the office. They really don't want to go back, since they got used to being virtual over the last few years. And so that's another trend with people and what's affecting the workplace, and why IO psychology is useful to the business world there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting, because in the assessments that I do for my job, a lot of times they're selection assessments. And so it's, the final 3-4 candidates for a position are going through the assessment, so that there's more objective data for the hiring group to consider when they're deciding who to put in the role, right? And oftentimes I ask them in my interview with them, do you want to be in the office, right? Do you want to? Would you like a hybrid role? What would be your preference? Because I typically know the answer of what the company is looking for, and it's helpful for me to have that information in my head, because then I can explore a little bit about why, right? And it wasn't a question I used to ask. I mean, prior to the pandemic, I didn't really ask that. It didn't matter, because most people were in the office, but now it's important to know.
Yeah, and it definitely affects, the types of teams and the type of people on a team, is remote versus hybrid versus in-person people, the different personalities someone has can affect how productive they are in each of those roles. Some people are more productive in a remote atmosphere, while some people have to be in person to be productive. I mean, at my company, we saw a drop in productivity during COVID because people were remote. And I mean, we had someone that their sales dropped to almost nothing because they could get away with doing nothing. And so there's a matter of accountability there when it comes to remote in the workplace. And again, that follows that trend of, is return to work the best idea, or is there something we can do to, balance it out? Again, IO psychology being useful in the workplace for that reason, because that's what we examine as IO psychology professionals. We examine these statistics and we're trained on it.
Yeah. And the kind of, I would say that like the depth, like the example that you gave, the depth that you could go to understand that person, right? That I think that is what's so fascinating to me, right? Because it brings up questions of, work-life balance, right? I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, I work remotely the majority of the time. It's kind of nice when I have a 20-minute break to go and run and do my laundry really quick, because then I don't have to do it later when I'm done working, right? And so productivity, in a weird way, I think there's so much depth and so many different things to consider when it comes to return to work. And again, probably another podcast episode for us to consider talking about.
Yeah, we'll definitely touch back on it. Obviously, guys, for you guys listening, this is really that high-level overview. We're trying to give you an understanding of why IO psychology is useful in the workplace. We're talking about business practice. We're talking about business in general. We're not just going to talk about IO psychology, but the purpose, again, of this podcast is to bring psychology to all these organizational dilemmas you're trying to solve. And that's why we want to really go in depth about why this topic is popular and important to the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's important too to note that there's not a solution that's a one size fits all, right? Every organization is unique. Every team, every individual, every leader, everyone is unique in their own way. And so we're not here to tell you what the best way or the right way is to do things. We can talk to you a little bit, throughout the episodes about best practices or things we've learned. But, ultimately, I think our goal is to empower all of you to be really curious and think about it in your own way too. Right. We'll give you maybe some starters. And as we talked about kind of at the beginning, we're going to maybe give you some experiential learning opportunities so you can be your own Sherlock in your organization. So,
I mean, when it comes to organizational development and inputting interventions or new implementations to companies. So whether that be workforce changes or just new rewards-based incentives, different performance management system, you name it, it could get worked on. Anything that changes in the organization. We have to talk, as an IO psychology professional, we have to talk to the leaders. We have to talk to the employees. And so it's important to know what they're thinking about the situation. And so your input to an IO psychology professional is so important to ensure that the right outcome occurs. I see very often consultants work with a company but don't quite understand what would build buy-in in the employees, or how the company already works, or how to build buy-in even from the leaders. And if they don't understand that as a consultant, they're never going to provide the best solution that they can. When we talk about, there's no one size fits all. You can take theories, you can take different case studies, and you can utilize those towards your own, but you still have to specify it to your company. So, for example, there might be a case study on a 40-person company. Well, you want to use that case study, but you have a 200-person company. Well, you need to tailor it to 200 people, not 40 people, or vice versa. I mean, Elizabeth, my capstone back in school, it was about taking a large company's organizational intervention. So it was one from GE, and making it valid for a small company. And I actually applied it to my small company, because my company is less than 50 people, or the company I work in. Shouldn't say my company, but it's very dear to my heart. So I love the company. But I wanted to show that maybe this type of intervention blueprint does work for my company, but no matter what, you still have to specify it, whether that be based off of the tactics or the tests you're using, or like for example, I wanted to be able to test morale. Well, a large company's morale based test is not going to work for a small company,
Right.
because it's might be too skewed. It won't allow the intricacies to really take part as they need to. But so yeah, you get blueprints and you get case studies and you get examples to go off of, but you always, always, always need to apply the specifics of your company
Yeah.
to the intervention.
No, I 100% agree with that. Out of curiosity, if you don't mind me asking, how did it turn out? Capstone.
I mean, I think it was one of the best things I've ever written. It was super fun to look at all the intricacies of this intervention, that it came out of a case study from General Electric, one of the largest companies in the world. And I basically proved that these small focus groups can still solve issues in a small company, and used statistical evaluations not brought by that GE intervention, but different ones to the company. And it showed valid, it showed it worked. And our culture definitely, I was able to get a temperature on the culture, and make some valuable change to it, and hopefully can continue to using the same system.
That is awesome. That is so cool. I think that'll be one of the fun parts of this podcast too, is bringing in some of those examples and really being able to work through them. And just kind of understand again, what are some things that work and what are some things that aren't, and how do we figure that out, right? Like, how do we critically analyze these interventions that we're looking to put into place? Because there are, you can go on Google and just search a million things, right? And sometimes you find the answer and sometimes you don't, right? But really, I think it's more just about being able to take all of the information and distill it down into what is going to work for you, given the organization you're in or the culture you're in, as well as considering some of those more macro factors. As well. And I think, that's a key focus of what I do in my work. It's not just, I mentioned selection assessment. It's not just understanding the person and the role and the team. It's understanding what's happening in manufacturing right now that's impacting, right? The hiring of different people, or, thinking about like doing a selection assessment for a chief technology officer. I mean, technology is changing every single day, right? Like, I can't just say, yeah, this person, knows how to use Word and Excel and can code in SQL and R and all of these things. Yep, he's going to be a great, technology officer. Not necessarily, because there's so much changing and they need to also be up to date on the trends. Right?
Yeah, it's not just those hard skill sets, it's those competencies that they have. And that's something that's so important to test. So, I mean, we had brought a sales manager on just recently, and I mean, she's already doing amazing. I am so thankful. I feel like there's like this weight off my shoulders with having her, because she just thinks so much like myself and some of our other leaders in the team, just about developing people. And you could tell that there were certain people we didn't select because they just did not have those soft skill competencies they needed. And that's, I mean, another reason I psychology is useful in the workplace. Soft skills are hard to test. Soft skills are hard to even just pick up on. And so you have the talent acquisition psychology professionals, and that's what they focus on, is those soft skill competencies, not just the hard skills when it comes to hiring. I mean, you said you've done hiring, Elizabeth, so you know.
Oh, I know. I definitely know. One time he'll know exactly who he is when I say this, but I was hiring somebody for my team at a previous company, and for whatever, I don't know what it was. He had a music background. I was looking for someone in talent development and kind of organizational development. So had gotten a degree in music, and was really wanting to kind of break into this world and break into business. And there was something about, I just thought, I'm going to try something different. I mean, why not? Right. Now, he had a lot of the hard skills that he needed, right? Like very detail oriented and very eager to learn and very resourceful, and all of the things that I was looking for from a kind of more technical skill set, if you will. But there was something about him that he just wasn't the same. And he was one of the best team members I have ever worked with. And I'm really glad that I had kind of challenged myself to go outside the norm a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes that textbook best candidate is not your best candidate. And that's actually something I taught one of my supervisors. He always wanted that. He's like, this person, this person, this person. And you saw we had a little bit more turnover with those people because they might have been the best candidate by book for this type of job, but were they the best candidate for our team?
Right.
And clearly they were not the best candidate for our team. We had a situation where he wanted to offer it to one person, I wanted to offer it to the other. And so we went back and forth, and the person he had chosen actually showed their true colors in offering the position to her, because she was, yes, when people are sick, it's hard to answer and you should definitely take care of yourself. But you can't go lack of communication when you only have 2 days to respond to yes or no on a job. You can't.
Right.
And that's just a quick yes. It can be as simple as that. And
Right.
so she showed her true colors, and we went with the second candidate. And he has been an amazing part of our team since. And I am so glad. And my supervisor and I, we've had the conversation. He's like, I'm so glad that it worked out the way it did. I'm like, everything happens for a reason.
Oh, it sure does. Oh my gosh. I know. I have to give a shout out to Cole really quick. I'm going to tag him in this just so you know, because it's been fun to watch his progression now into kind of this talent space. And how I think, and I don't know, I think it'd be interesting to hear from him at some point, but just how the conversations we had about IO psychology, like it was so good. And I think there was something about just kind of the culture around us. And again, with all of the factors at play that, allowed for that discussion and that fruitful like learning. And I don't know, I think he's doing pretty good today. So shout out to Cole on that one.
Awesome. Well, love those little shout outs to the people that definitely bring a lot of meaning to what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know about you, but I am excited. I think I probably have said that about 72 times during this podcast already, but I really am. So there's that. But I'm excited to keep digging into all of these different kind of topics and from a kind of a structural perspective, Morgan and I have chosen to kind of take each month with a little bit of a theme, and then bringing some guests in to talk with us about their experience. So I don't know, Morgan, would you like to share a little bit about next month's theme?
Yeah, I'd love to. So obviously, we're talking about IO psychology and how it's useful in the workplace. So we're really going to use those topics come next month. We're going to be talking about organizational mission and vision, something that is so important for a company to create this level of global understanding in the company for what everyone's working towards together. It creates that teamwork. It creates the collaborative type of environment. And so we're going to talk about organizational mission and vision, and we're going to actually bring a great connection of Elizabeth's, Dan Stoltz, who he's the president of Blaze Credit Union. So we're going to bring some high-level people in. We told you we're going to bring some awesome guest speakers, and we're really looking forward to that conversation. Dan's going to join us the second podcast next month, which will be March 19th. But Elizabeth and I will give you a little introduction to why organizational mission and visions are so important, and that'll drop on the 5th.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget to, check us out on LinkedIn and all the social media channels as well, because we'll have some fun interactive polls, and we'd love to have you talk with us and share your experiences and opinions as we get rolling into this world of organizational Sherlocks.
Yeah, we told you that it's important to have everyone's opinion when it comes to certain subjects. So bring them on. Don't be afraid to reach out to Elizabeth or I through the email or through our LinkedIn's. We definitely want to hear what you have to say, and we want to hear what other topics you want us to talk about in the coming months.
Yeah. Well, sounds good. Well, should we wrap it up today, Morgan? Let people get back to their day and join us on the 5th for our next podcast about mission and vision alignment.
Yeah, this is Organizational Sherlocks signing off.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Well, listeners, this concludes another intriguing episode of Organizational Sherlocks. I'm Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, reminding you that the journey to success is an ongoing investigation.
Always remember to stay curious, stay strategic, and keep utilizing insights to decode your business mysteries.
Join us every Tuesday for your next Whodunit. This is Organizational Sherlocks closing today's case.
We will see you all next time.